Elias Caldwell had lived alone for 8 years, speaking only to his horses and the wind. After that one night when men in uniform took everything he loved, he'd shut the door on the world and never opened it again. The rain that night came down like it meant to bury the land. Wind howled through the hills, dragging the scent of mud and gunpowder through the cracks in the cabin walls. Elias sat by the fire, repairing an old bridle, eyes dull and distant. Then came the knock. Not a friendly tap, not the sound of a neighbor. It was hard, desperate, like someone banging on the edge of their last chance. What would you do if fate knocked on your door in the middle of a storm? Share your thoughts in the comments below and hit that like button if this tale grips you. Elias froze, leather strap still in hand. No one came to this ranch, not anymore, and anyone who dared usually saw the end of his rifle barrel before they got within 10 feet. Another knock, and voices, female, urgent. Apache. Elias's gut twisted. It had been years since he heard that language. His wife Clara had spoken it, had sung it to their daughter, both long buried under Texas dirt after one bad decision. His hand drifted toward the Winchester above the hearth. But then came a different voice, this one in English. Please, we know you're in there. Just one night of shelter, not a demand. A plea. Elias moved to the door, pressing his ear to the thick oak. He could hear them clearly now, 10 women, 1 baby. One voice rising above the others, closer now, firm in its fear. They're coming. If you don't help us, we'll die out here. And when they find our bodies on your porch, you'll die too. His fingers rested on the iron bar that had sealed that door shut for nearly a decade. Clara's voice echoed in his head. Kindness is what keeps us human, Eli. But Clara was gone, and kindness had died with her. Still, his hand moved. The bar creaked as it lifted rust, fighting him like a spirit that didn't want to let go. The door swung open. The wind punched him in the chest, cold and wild, carrying the weight of what he'd just done. 10 Apache women huddled beneath the porch overhang, soaked and shivering, their traditional dresses torn and muddied. The youngest looked barely 16, cradling a swaddled bundle that moved weakly, a baby pale and silent. But it was the woman at the center who held Elias's stare. She didn't flinch, didn't plead. She stood like a leader born from ashes. I am Nia, she said. These are my sisters, my daughters, my people. We've been running for 3 days. Elias opened his mouth, closed it. He had questions, who they were, what they were running from. But the baby's color was what spoke loudest. Get in, he said, stepping aside. They moved fast like ghosts sliding through a crack in time. Rain, blood, fear, and something else followed them inside. Nia was the last to enter. As she passed, she leaned close, her voice like gravel in the wind. The soldiers hunting us. They're not far behind. An hour, maybe less. And they won't stop until we're dead. Elias closed the door and dropped the bar back into place. But this time it wasn't to keep danger out. It was to keep himself locked inside the fight he'd just chosen. Can you feel the tension building? Drop a like if this story's pulling you in, and let me know in the comments what you think Elias should do next. The storm raged on, but inside the cabin it was the silence that pressed hardest. Elias stood near the hearth, one hand still close to his rifle, the other steadying the emotions twisting behind his ribs. The Apache women had spread out around the room, but they made no sound beyond the occasional hiss of pain or the rustle of wet cloth. They weren't loud, they weren't broken, they were waiting. Nia stood near the fire, steam rising from her drenched dress. The cut above her eyebrow had stopped bleeding, but her eyes had not softened. They held something deeper than defiance, something Elias recognized from a mirror long ago. I don't like mysteries in my house, he said. His voice was low level. Why are you running? Nia met his gaze. Because we refuse to die quietly. She said it plainly, with no drama or plea, as if she were tired of needing to explain it. They came at night, she continued. Burned our homes, shot anyone who resisted, said it was a routine clearing, that we were hostile. Elias narrowed his eyes. You weren't. We were farmers' mothers' sisters. Her voice dropped. My youngest sister didn't survive what they did to her, but she lived long enough to tell us who led it. Captain Holt, Elias guessed. Naya nodded. He and his men have been calling it pacification. But it's not war, it's slaughter. Elias didn't flinch. He'd seen the same story play out before, with different names and different uniforms. Men drunk on power, pretending their guns made them righteous. So this, he said, gesturing around the room, is about revenge. It's about truth, Nia replied, and survival. He knows what we saw, what we could say. That's why he's hunting us. Elias turned away from the fire, walking to the front window. Outside, the storm had begun to ease, but the night remained thick with danger. In the distance, shadows shifted. He couldn't see them yet, but he could feel them coming. You're not just a bunch of fleeing women, he said. You planned this. Naya didn't deny it. We didn't choose your home by accident. He faced her again. Then why me? Because you live alone, she said simply. Because you haven't been seen in town for years. Because we heard stories about what happened to your family, about the man you used to be. Her words landed like a weight Elias wasn't ready to carry. I've got a root cellar, he said after a moment. Hidden hatch, stone-lined. It might fit all of you. Naya shook her head. If they find us down there, they won't leave you alive, not even to tell your version of the story. Elias barked a dry laugh. I stopped being on their side 8 years ago. A beat passed between them, silent but full of understanding. You don't have to get involved, she said. You didn't ask for this. Doesn't matter, he replied. It's here. A crack of thunder echoed across the hills, but Elias heard something beneath it. Horses. He crossed to the window again, careful not to be seen. Movement along the tree line, flickers of torchlight silhouettes on horseback. They're close, he muttered. Nia moved beside him. An hour, maybe less. 8, you said, maybe 10. And you think you can fight them? She glanced toward the others. One woman had pulled a knife from her boot. Another was wrapping her bleeding arm with steady hands. We don't have a choice, Nia said. They'll kill us either way. Elias nodded, his mind already slipping into the old rhythm, calculating positions, choke points, fallback spots. It was like shaking dust off a gun that never really cooled. You've got guts, he told her. We've got reasons. He looked back at her, saw past the bruises and the mud and the war-worn stare. So do I, he thought. And for the first time in 8 years, Elias Caldwell began to feel like a man with something left to fight for. What would you fight for if the odds were against you? Hit that like button if Naya's courage inspires you, and share your thoughts in the comments. The sound of hooves sliced through the fading storm, rhythmic and slow, like a death sentence being read aloud. Elias moved like a man waking from a dream. His rifle was in hand, a box of ammunition tucked under his arm as he scanned the shadows through the cabin window. The wind had shifted. He could feel it in his bones the way old soldiers did before the first shot was ever fired. But what stopped him cold wasn't outside. It was the transformation inside. Nia was no longer the desperate woman who had begged him for shelter. She stood near the fire now, with a posture forged from years of battle, not the kind waged with armies, but the kind waged to survive. In her hand was a blade, the metal catching the light like a warning. And she wasn't alone. Around the room, the other women had begun to change too. One drew a knife from under her skirt. Another rolled up her sleeve to reveal scars that weren't from housework. One woman pulled a length of braided sinew from her bag and tied her hair back with the kind of precision Elias had only ever seen in fighters preparing for blood. Elias blinked. "You're not refugees," he said. Naya met his eyes, voice flat. "We never were." For a moment there was nothing but the crackle of the dying fire between them. "Captain Holt thinks he's hunting frightened women who will cower and beg," she continued. "He's about to learn otherwise." Elias looked around the cabin, his sanctuary for 8 long years, and saw that it had already become something else entirely. Not a place of retreat, a war room. The youngest woman, still cradling the baby, moved to the rear of the cabin without needing to be told. 2 others followed her, their feet light, eyes sharp. They moved in rhythm, trained, rehearsed. These women hadn't stumbled here by chance. They'd chosen this ground, they'd chosen him. Elias turned back to Nia. "How many men have you killed?" Her answer was without hesitation. Enough to know Holt's men won't be the last to underestimate Apache women, but they might be the most surprised. Outside voices rose through the storm. Captain Holt was barking orders, coordinating movements, spreading his men around the perimeter. Elias counted 6 voices at least, probably more. "They'll come through the front and back," he said. "Try to pin us in, take us fast. They think we're afraid." Nia stepped beside him, her voice cool. "Let them." The rain had slowed to a mist now, and through the window he could make out shapes moving through the trees. Holt's soldiers were positioning themselves, careful, quiet, confident. They thought they knew what waited for them inside. They had no idea. "There's a cellar beneath the kitchen," Elias repeated. "Stone walls, hidden hatch. Could hold all of you if it came to that." Naya shook her head. "If we hide, they'll hunt us again tomorrow, and the next day, and every day after that. So what's the plan?" She moved to the table and pulled a map, crude but functional, drawn in coal and smudged ink. It showed the ranch house, the fence line, the slope leading down to the trees. Elias was stunned. "You've been planning this." Naya looked at him. "You were our last move. You or no one." He didn't know what to say to that, but his hands moved anyway. Pulled open the drawer beneath his tool bench, revealing the supplies he'd hoped never to touch again. Caltrops wire, an old hand-forged tomahawk wrapped in oiled cloth. He'd kept them not for use, but because a part of him had always known this day might come. "A distraction," Naya said. "They come through the front. You meet them. They expect surrender. And we flank. Fast, precise, kill without noise." Elias looked at her, really looked, and nodded. Outside boots splashed through puddles and a voice called out again. Arrogant, assured, "Rancher, this is Captain Holt. We're tracking fugitives. Open this door or we assume you're harboring enemies of the United States." Naya whispered, "One of them by the barn is Sergeant Ellis. He was there when they murdered my husband." She pointed to the far side of the cabin. "And the one by your well? That's Corporal Reed. He held my sister down." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Elias felt his grip tighten around the rifle. 8 years of silence cracked like old leather. They weren't soldiers. They were predators in uniform, and predators only understood one thing. He looked at Nia. "What do you need from me?" She smiled, then sharp as her blade. "When Holt walks through that door, he's expecting fear." Elias chambered around. The click echoed through the room like a promise. "Then let's disappoint him." The knock didn't come this time. The door shattered inward with a boot and a bang. Captain Holt stormed through with a rifle at his shoulder, expecting a whimper, a scream, anything but what met him. Elias stood dead center in the room, calm as stone rifle already leveled. The glow of the hearth lit his eyes just enough to show there was no fear left in them, just purpose. For half a second, Holt froze. It was long enough. The mirror flashed. Naya's signal. From the shadows, movement ignited like dry brush to fire. The cabin exploded with motion. Two of Nia's women dropped from the rafters, knives flashing. Another rose from behind, overturned furniture, a length of cord snapping around a soldier's throat before he could shout. Steel found flesh. Fire met blood. Holt turned shouting, but the chaos swallowed his orders. His men were out of formation, spread too thin and acting too slow. They hadn't come for a fight, they'd come for sport, and now they were prey. Elias never took his eyes off Holt. He didn't fire, not yet. He wanted the captain to see it, to feel the trap closing around him. Every scream, every gurgle, every mistake. Holt swung his rifle toward Naya, but she was already behind him. "This is for my sister," she whispered, and drove her blade between his ribs. The captain's body jerked as his breath vanished, the rifle clattering uselessly to the floor. He dropped to his knees, eyes wide with something Elias hadn't seen in a long time. Recognition. He knew he was dying, and exactly why. Nia stepped around to face him, holding his gaze as his life drained out in gasps. "And this," she said, her voice flat, "is for thinking we'd stay quiet." The last thing Captain Holt saw was the woman he'd once thought too broken to matter. Then he was gone. Silence didn't follow, because war never ends clean. From outside came the pounding of more boots, more men, yells of confusion, flashes of light from torches, gunshots ripping through the storm-laced night. Elias grabbed Nia's arm. That wasn't all of them. She was already nodding. Holt came ahead. "The rest are still outside. How many? At least a dozen." From the rear door, one of the younger women appeared, face streaked with blood, not her own. "They found the wagon. More are coming. We have minutes, maybe less." Elias grabbed his gear, already calculating. "We can't hold the house. Then we take the fight to them," Naya said, "before they regroup." He hesitated, then nodded. He hadn't come this far to die inside walls. They burst out into the storm, slipping into the shadows beyond the porch. Mud sucked at their boots. The trees ahead blurred with torchlight and confused shouting. The element of surprise was gone, but the terrain was theirs. Nia gestured toward the creek bed. Two women peeled off, circling wide. Elias led the others low and fast along the fencing, using the same angles he'd once used to defend livestock, now defending lives. In the clearing near the barn, they saw them, a line of soldiers, some still mounting, others holding the perimeter guns raised, eyes darting, but not high enough. Naya's signal came sharp, 3 clicks of a stone. From the tree line, the Apache warriors struck, like ghosts from the dirt. Knives whispered through necks, rifles cracked. A man screamed as caltrops shattered his foot beneath his horse. Another dropped as a tripwire took him off his feet and into a pit Elias had dug years ago for wild boar. Elias didn't fire until he was sure. Then he did. His shot dropped the sergeant, aiming for Nia, sending him spinning into the mud. One by one the soldiers fell, not in a battle, but in a reckoning. In 10 minutes it was over. Bodies lay still beneath the soft patter of rain. The last torch sputtered out in the mud. The only sound now was the wind and the strained breath of those who still stood. Nia looked around, chest-heaving eyes scanning for threats that no longer existed. Elias lowered his rifle, but before relief could settle in, a new sun cut across the clearing. More horses. More men, coming fast from the ridge above. Lights bloomed, dozens, not another patrol, an entire company, and at their front a man on a white horse, his voice cutting clean through the wind. "This is Colonel Warren of the United States Army. Lay down your weapons, you are surrounded." Naya's jaw clenched. "They weren't hunting us," she whispered. "They were baiting us." Elias felt the weight of it then. The trap had been deeper than he ever imagined, but before panic could take hold, a voice rose from the shadows near the house. Nia's second in command, her voice firm, unshaken. "We have his son." The clearing froze. Elias turned slowly. A young man in lieutenant's colors knelt in the mud, a blade at his throat. He looked barely 20, terrified but very much alive. Nia stepped forward, her knife steady. "This fight isn't over," she said, "but it's about to change." Rain dripped from the trees like nervous sweat. The clearing had gone dead silent, dozens of soldiers frozen in formation, all eyes fixed on one figure, the colonel's son, kneeling in the mud with Nia's blade pressed gently, deliberately against his throat. Colonel Warren's voice came again, slower now, more measured. "You have Lieutenant Daniel Warren," he said. "Let him go, and I promise a fair hearing. None of you need to die tonight." Elias stepped up beside Nia, rifle still in hand. Rain streaking his face. "A fair hearing," he called out, like the one Captain Holt gave their village silence. Nia turned to Elias, speaking low but firm. "This is the part where they talk. Stall, reposition, ready their sharpshooters." He nodded. "And we don't blink." Lieutenant Daniel trembled beneath her hand. "Please, I didn't know. I thought we were chasing raiders." "Are you blind or just naive?" Nia snapped. "You marched with a man who burned homes, slaughtered children, and called it justice." I never saw." "Exactly," Elias said. "You never looked." From the tree line a shot cracked. Not aim, just a warning. Warren was running out of patience. "You harm my son," he boomed, "and I will wipe your names from the earth." Nia leaned in closer to the lieutenant's ear. "Tell your father to call off his men." "Now." He won't. He's not like that." "You don't know what your father is." Elias cut in. "But you're about to learn." The soldiers at the edge of the clearing began shifting 1 inch at a time, repositioning for clean lines of fire. Rain softened the ground, but not the danger. Nia stood, keeping the blade against the boy's throat without drawing blood. Her voice rang across the clearing like iron on steel. "You brought war to our homes, killed our sons, ravaged our daughters, then called yourselves heroes." She turned slowly, facing the line of torches glowing from Warren's side. "You want your son back, Colonel? Then step forward alone, no rifle, no men, just you." A murmur rippled through the troops. Warren didn't move. Nia raised her voice. "Or stay where you are and bury your last heir in a grave you dug with lies." That got him. The colonel dismounted. He walked forward slowly, mud sucking at his boots. No weapon, no backup, just the fury of a man who'd built his power on fear and was now being dragged into humility by a woman he'd once tried to erase. He stopped 10 feet away. Nia still held the knife, but Elias noticed her hands were steady, too steady for someone bluffing. "This was never about your son," she said. "It's about the truth, about the war you've been waging in the shadows, one village at a time." "Those were operations," Warren growled. "Orders from the top." Elias stepped forward. "Funny how those orders always left the men alive. And the women buried." Warren's gaze snapped to Elias. "You think this makes you a hero siding with savages?" Elias raised his rifle a fraction. "No, but at least I'm not hiding behind a uniform soaked in children's blood." The colonel looked to his son. "Daniel, you come here now." But Daniel didn't move. "Sir," he said, voice shaking, "I saw what they did, what Holt did, what we covered up." Warren's jaw clenched. "You're confused." "No, I'm not." Daniel looked at Nia. If I testify, if I speak to investigators, will it help?" Nia didn't blink. "It won't bring our dead back. But it might stop more from joining them." Elias watched Warren's face crumble slow, like stone breaking under water. He knew it was over. Nia eased the blade away from Daniel's neck. He stepped back unharmed, his hands raised. Warren's men didn't lower their guns, not yet, but the balance had shifted. In the distance, thunder rolled, but this time it came not from the sky, but from the sound of galloping hooves. New riders, different uniforms, U.S. Marshals, dozens. The forest lit up with lanterns and iron badges. The cavalry had arrived, but not for war, for reckoning. A marshal rode forward, dismounted beside Warren, and handed him a folded sheet of paper. By order of the Territorial Office, Colonel Warren, you are under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and unlawful military action against native civilians. The colonel didn't argue. He just stood there silent, defeated, small. Dawn broke like a slow confession. The first light slipped across the hills, catching on the wet leaves, the broken rifles, the blood-soaked earth. Smoke still curled from a half-burned torch left in the mud. Its glow faded like the lies it had helped carry into the night. Colonel Warren was gone, dragged away in chains, his boots leaving trenches in the muck behind him. Some of his soldiers went with him, those who'd fired without question, who'd laughed while their captain destroyed families. The rest were disarmed, stunned, shamed. They stood in silence, watching justice march off into the woods like something holy. Nia stood at the edge of the field, hands clasped behind her back. Her face was unreadable, but Elias knew what silence like that meant. It was the silence that comes after you've buried more than bodies, after you've buried parts of yourself to make room for survival. The baby stirred in the young girl's arms, still alive, still breathing. And that was something. Elias leaned against the porch post, rifle across his lap. His cabin stood behind him, walls chipped from bullet strikes. Window shattered, door still off its hinges. The place he'd built to keep the world out had been blown wide open. And maybe it was better that way. You should leave, Nia said quietly, stepping up beside him. There will be others, men who followed Warren's orders, who won't care about trials or justice. Elias nodded slowly. I know. What will you do? He looked out over the wreckage, the place that had been his refuge and his prison. I think I'll go west, he said. I hear there's land out there not soaked in blood yet. Nia turned to him, and when it is, Elias gave a tired smile. Then I do this all over again. She studied him, then reached into her cloak and pulled something wrapped in hide. It was her knife, the same one she'd held to Holt's throat, to the colonel's sons. She handed it to him. You'll need it, she said. Elias held it, feeling the weight. It was lighter than it looked, balanced deadly. Are you sure? She nodded. It's done its part. A soft breeze blew through the clearing, the kind that carries things away, smoke, ghosts, old names. The Apache women gathered near the trail, preparing to leave. Some limped, some bore new scars, but all of them walked tall, survivors, warriors, witnesses. Nia lingered a moment longer. I don't know what they'll write about this night, she said. If they'll call it justice or treason. They'll lie, Elias said. They always do. Then let's make sure someone lives to tell it right. She looked at him one last time, a nod, a wordless promise. Then she turned and walked back toward her people. Elias watched them vanish into the forest, their shadows flickering between the trees. And for the first time in years, he felt something stir in his chest. Not rage, not grief, not guilt, purpose. 2 weeks later, Elias rode into a trading post in Montana Territory. His coat was torn, his eyes sharper. The townsfolk gave him space not out of fear, but because they sensed the gravity of a man who had stood on the edge of something awful and chosen not to fall. A woman named Hannah Larson met him at the post office, baby on her hip, eyes wide with disbelief. You made it, she whispered. So did you, he replied. They sat on the porch for a while, saying nothing, just watching wagons roll past, children chase dogs through the dust. Life went on. It always did. But for some people it was no longer built on lies. That winter Elias took work building cabins along the frontier, no longer hiding, but planting something. Word spread, a quiet man with a steady hand, and no tolerance for cruelty, the kind of man you wanted nearby when justice felt too far away. He never stayed long, never unpacked all the way, but each place he left behind had one thing in common. No one went hungry under his roof, no one knocked without getting an answer. And every now and then, when the wind changed direction, he'd hear the voice of a woman who once saved him by reminding him what it meant to fight for someone else. Years passed like the wind that carved canyons into stone, slow, silent, and permanent. Elias Caldwell never sought fame. He never wrote a word of what happened on that storm-soaked night when 10 Apache women turned his home into a battlefield and he turned his soul into a weapon. But stories have a way of surviving even when their authors don't. Children in the territory grew up hearing the tale of the blood-rain night of a lone rancher and 10 ghost-walking warriors who stood against an army and won. But the real story was quieter than that, more sacred. Every autumn, as the cottonwoods turned gold and the river slowed to a whisper, a rider would appear on the horizon alone, straight-backed, her long black hair streaked now with silver. Nia. She came not with weapons, but with bread, with herbs, with stories. And every year she and Elias would sit beneath the same tree planted from the sapling they'd taken from the burned edge of her old village. They wouldn't speak of war or loss or politics. They'd speak of survival of children born after peace, of names that no longer had to be whispered for fear of who might hear. On his 73rd birthday, Elias didn't wake. He died in his sleep in a cabin he'd built with his own hands. Surrounded by things that had outlasted violence, tools, a hand-carved crib he'd made for the daughter of Hannah Larson, a tin-type photo of Clara and their little girl, and Nia's blade resting on the mantel like a relic. He was buried beside the creek and ground he'd once planned to flood to kill his enemies. Instead, it became his final piece. Nia came to the burial. So did Hannah Larson. So did a dozen settlers and 20 members of Nia's tribe. They said no words over his grave, just planted the old cavalry saber beside the marker like a stone blade down in the dirt, a symbol not of war, but of the man who had once refused to let fear define him. Years later, the land Elias once owned became something rare in the West Neutral Ground. Settlers and Comanche alike came there to speak, to trade, to remember. No guns were drawn, no grudges held, only stories passed like bread at a table. At the heart of it all, beneath the tree he and Nia had planted, was a single plaque. This land once knew war, but it remembers peace. Beneath it, in smaller letters, EC, he opened his door, and the world walked through it. In her final years, Nia became a peacekeeper, more respected than any chief, more feared than any colonel. But she always credited one night, one man. She said, "We brought him a war. He gave us a home." And to the girl who had once clutched a baby and wept beside Elias's fire, Nia said this: "Never underestimate a man who knows how to build things, especially when the world keeps trying to burn them down." And somewhere between wind and wood smoke, if you listen hard enough, you can still hear it. Not the sound of war drums, not rifles, but a baby's breath, a woman's voice, and a man. Quiet as the land whispering, "Come in." Quickly. The story of Elias Caldwell and Nia teaches us profound life values, courage, redemption, and the power of standing for justice against overwhelming odds. Elias, a man broken by loss, rediscovers purpose by opening his door to strangers, showing that compassion can rebuild what grief destroys. Nia and her Apache women embody resilience, proving that strength lies not in numbers but in unyielding resolve to fight for truth. Their alliance highlights the importance of unity across divides, where shared humanity triumphs over prejudice. The tale reminds us that even in the darkest storms, one choice to act, to resist, to protect can reshape destinies and create legacies of peace. It challenges us to confront our own fears, question blind loyalty, and build something enduring even when the world tries to tear it down. Ultimately, it's a call to live with purpose, to open our doors to those in need, and to fight for what's right, no matter the cost. If this story inspires you, like, share, subscribe, and drop a comment below to tell us how it moved you.